monogamy or polygamy. No, it's not polygamy. It's poly.
Air, air, put,
Today, Junior?
Are you mentally ill, or is life just really hard? Today, that's what we're going to explore. I think we often mix this up. Society, I think, has tilted way too far in the direction of telling us that something is wrong with you. You hear from a friend, you try to tell them a problem, and the first thing they tell you, go talk to a therapist. I'm not sure if they're right, and today we're going to explore, is life just difficult, or are you mentally ill? So, why does this distinction matter? Why does it matter that we kind of understand what that line is in our lives of mental illness as opposed to just the problems of living? So one thing I am always thinking about is how often that solutions are pretty easy to come by once we understand a problem. Now, what I often see with people is that they don't understand their problem and they start solving a problem that's not actually really the problem. That's, bringing apart all of these symptoms, whether it's anxiety, depression, or all these things that are going on. And so they successfully solved a problem. It just wasn't the problem that they were trying to address that was bringing about all of the suffering. So if we're not addressing the right problems, and so let's say we're addressing mental illness, there's something wrong with the way that we're thinking, we're perceiving the world, and we're not addressing that there's a challenge that just has been thrust upon me because I'm now 18 and life has changed and my context has changed. Well, the solutions are going to be radically different. And if we don't address the actual problem that's going on, well, you're not going to get better. You're not going to feel better about your life, and you're still going to have the same problem because you solved a different problem than the problem you're looking at. So it's really important to know what are we actually doing here, and you to ask yourself, what is my problem? Is my problem that there's something wrong the way that I view the world, the way that I regulate my emotions, the way that I behave? Or am I going through a difficult time in my life where I am now having to do something new? There's a new environmental situation that I've never had to deal with before, and I don't have the tools to deal with. Maybe I need to learn a new skill. And that is just so different, and the way that you solve those problems are so different from one another. I think is a very important question to ask ourselves. I think the other second part of this is that the way you think about yourself in relation to this problem is different. If I think of, I think of it as an 18-year-old, you graduate high school and you now have this problem, which is, well, what do I do when I go to college, and where do I go to college? Before you kind of were going to one school every September, you knew exactly where you were going. And I have a new challenge I have to overcome, and I get to choose and figure out where I want to go, and that's interesting. And it usually comes with anxiety. But if I think, well, I'm just anxious and I have generalized anxiety disorder and there's something wrong with me, the way I go about addressing this problem is going to be radically different. And again, my thought about myself is that there's something wrong with me rather than life is throwing me a curveball right now, and maybe even a fastball down the middle that we kind of expected. It's still hard to hit. And so we're going to think of ourselves in different ways. We're going to view ourselves as broken, mentally ill, something wrong with us, as opposed to that feeling that is uncomfortable and maybe we could amount to call suffering. It's just a signal that life's changed, that there's a new problem that has arisen that you have not dealt with yet. So being able to distinguish what is mental illness and what are the problems of living help us solve, one, the correct problem, so we're actually solving the thing that's going on. Two, it's going to impact how we view ourselves, and so if we can do this correctly. So now I'm going to talk to you about what are these problems of life. So I am going to take one of my favorite clinicians and theorists, Alfred Adler. He writes very simply and concisely, which is one of the reasons I love him. And he gives us three different problems of life. And so his problems of life, he says, every human being just has to deal with and figure out how to solve, essentially, is the social problem, that we are social creatures that must interact with one another. We do not live in a vacuum. Nothing we can do can ever make it so that we can live in a vacuum. Even if you hide inside a room, never leave your room, and DoorDash everything, make them leave it on the step, and never interact with a human being, guess what? You're still relying on that DoorDash guy. You're relying on the restaurant and the people and the cooks that made the DoorDash. You're relying on the farmers who farmed the food or slaughtered the cows or whatever it is. It's a long chain of people, and you're really just leaning on other people's cooperation and that they have figured out how to solve this problem in social life and you haven't. We can't get away from it. We have to interact with other people, and if you have not figured out how to do this successfully, it causes a bunch of problems in your life. So problem number two. Problem of work or occupation. This is the reality that we live on planet Earth. There's a limited amount of resources. And historically, we had to go out and get what we needed out of life. So whether we had to hunt, we had to gather, we had to build things with our hands. We had to do a whole bunch of things to survive and to get comfort and to be able to enjoy life. And we still have these problems, but technology has kind of changed this problem quite a bit. now I don't go out and hunt so I can eat food. I go out and work to get money so I can go buy food. Problem's still there. It just changed a little bit. And this helps us drive feelings of worth that I'm contributing to the whole of society. But it's a problem that we have to solve because if you don't, well, you have no food, you have nowhere to live, and that causes, again, a whole bunch of problems. Our last problem here, number 3, is our problem of love. We are a sexually dimorphic species, meaning that there are males and females, and for us to have children, there needs to be the sexual relationship of a male and a female. Just how our biology works, and is a problem that we have to solve if we want to maintain humanity, which personally I do. I think it's important and good that humans exist, and so to find someone to do that with, to build and create a family, is a problem to be solved that has many different solutions to this problem. And again, technology has changed this problem quite a bit as well. But nevertheless, if this problem is not solved, it's going to take up a big real estate chunk of our mind. We're going to feel distress. All of these things can cause you to feel anxiety, depression. These kind of umbrella terms, they can make you feel these things. And so those are the kind of problems everyone has to deal with. This is a very simple overview. You could probably get into way more detail, but life's difficult. There are legitimate, non-trivial problems that we have to solve every day, and if we don't, there are consequences to doing that. So, what about mental illness? Where does mental illness come into this? So, somewhere around up here, over there, I don't know where it's going to go. Somewhere, we're going to put up the DSM, which is the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual 5, which is the big book that therapists use to diagnose. And according to them, this is the definition of a mental disorder. It is a syndrome characterized by clinically significant disturbance in an individual's cognition, emotional regulation, or behavior that reflects a dysfunction in the psychological, biological, or developmental processes underlying mental functioning. Mental disorders are usually associated with significant distress or disability in social, occupational, and other important activities. Very fancy, lots of big words, but very similar to these problems in life. You read that last sentence there, that the significant distress in social, that was our first problem in life. Occupational, there's our second problem in life. And other important activities, I'm going to throw in sex in there because that's what that meant, for sure. But so, well, these seem like the same, almost. That, well, there's a significant distress, and we talked about how there can be significant distress in our problems of life, and maybe we can see how society is tilted towards seeing everything as a mental disorder, that there's something wrong with your brain if you are having just significant distress at dealing with these problems. I'm going to make a slightly different argument, is that I'm not going to say it's one or the other, that is a mixture of the two. And mental illness to me is the perpetual and consistent inability to meet the problems of life head on and successfully. If you are having problems socializing repeatedly, you're finding yourself always in broken relationships, and relationships that are either highly conflictual, you're finding people just hard to connect with. There's all the kinds of different social problems, but that is consistently being met throughout your entire life. You have not been able to solve this. Well, maybe there is a mental health disorder going on. Maybe that is the way that you are perceiving the world as much more dangerous than it is, makes it hard for you to connect with others. Maybe you have a really hard time regulating your emotions, and you become very emotionally dysregulated when there's ever a conflict, and that leads to the dissolution of relationships. I don't know, there's lots of different, again, things that can happen here, but what I would say is to look at it, hey, am I consistently having the same patterned problem over and over and over again? Well, that's when I would start looking at, maybe there is something wrong with the way I'm viewing the world. Maybe I'm mistaken about my beliefs. I need to take a closer look. And that's where you go talk to someone like me. You go see a therapist. You employ the help of someone that can point out some of these patterns that maybe you haven't noticed on your own. But that's so different than you're a high schooler, I mean, let's say you're a college student and you're graduating and you're having a hard time finding work. You're educated, you've sent in applications, you're pretty good at, interviews. It just hasn't happened. AI's coming in, took in your business and your industry, and now it's replacing you. And it's a real problem that people are facing right now. And my question is, like, are they depressed? Are they anxious about this process and that they have a mental health disorder? Or is this a problem of life that they just haven't figured out how to solve? And it's not so easy. It's not one or the other. If you fail to solve this problem repeatedly, that sadness and grief and depression about not getting a job can now expand into other domains of your life, and you start seeing yourself as worthless in general. These other problems of life start being impacted. And that's something Alfred Adler said, is that problems of life are not disconnected from one another. If you have a problem in one area, it will impact the other areas of your life. So to ask yourself and look and say, hey, all right, I'm struggling in this thing repeatedly over time. Maybe it is something with the way I'm seeing the world, and that's what helps for. It's what a therapist is for, to help you see patterns that you maybe have not seen within yourself. So on the flip side is life's just hard. Society doesn't really have the same scaffolding, I would say, in rituals, is something that I often think about, that we had before that dealt with the problems of life. I always think of like kind of adult rituals that we have. You know, you see some of this in Judaism. I think of bar and bat mitzvahs as this coming of age ceremony that we acknowledge, hey, you're becoming an adult. And we've had these throughout, different religions, different tribal kind of experiences. And often it was a marker of, hey, you've undergone some trial or tribulation of challenge. And usually this is like an analogy to life. You have overcome this, and you are now a better, stronger adult, maybe. That doesn't happen very often. Often the challenges that often our young people are going through right now are perceived as, there's something wrong with them. We need to intervene. We need to help them. There's something broken. And again, I think about what that does to your thought about yourself when you think there's something wrong with me, that I'm struggling with some really hard life decisions. Oh, I must have a mental health disorder. As opposed to, this is a problem that everyone has to deal with. And there's an opportunity for me to grow and become stronger. Or maybe I just need to go ask some people that have already solved this problem of life how they did it and got some advice about this. And how I go about doing these things are going to be very different depending on how far on the side of, do I think this is a pervasive problem that is, something wrong with my mental health? If it's a bigger chunk of that, okay, I need to go solve this doing this thing. But if a bigger chunk is like, this just sucks and I have to go grind and get better at something, again, it's just a very different solution. And what we need to do, as well as how we think about ourselves, varies very differently. So I hope this was a quick, hopefully very concise, and a lot more detail can be added to this idea of these mix of these problems. But to sum it up, there are problems in life you cannot avoid. Life will be challenging. You will feel pain, anxiety, suffering of many different types and flavors. Doesn't mean you're mentally ill. It might. It might mean that you are mentally ill, that over time there's a pattern to this, and that it consistently is impairing your ability to function and live your life successfully. But figuring out where that is for you is a question that only you can answer. I can't tell it to you. Even if you go see a therapist, they're not going to tell you. They can help work with you to maybe ask some of the questions that I'm asking you. So you can look in yourself and say, hey, is there something wrong with the way I'm seeing things, the way I'm perceiving things? It keeps ending in results that I don't like. Or am I in a particularly tough situation and maybe I need some encouragement? Maybe I just need a little pat on the ass and get out there and get doing it. So I hope this was helpful. As always, I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments. If you agree, disagree, think I'm out of my damn mind, let me know. I appreciate it. I think I want to build a community to think about these ideas, to play with perspectives, as I might say. So I hopefully, this will be some video. Sam will pop up over there, and hopefully I will see you all in the next one.